Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mohammed Umar. I am a PhD student at McWater School of Building Science of University, and today I am going to present our paper, which is titled Crime Prevention through Environmental Design in Pakistani Construction Industry, Benchmarking of Stakeholders Awareness. Uh, I am presenting on behalf of my co-authors, Professor Zan Faruqi and Dr. Eric Wetzel. The paper ID is 72. Will Now I'll begin with the introduction. So, in cities like Karachi and other metropolitan cities around the world, the one thing that any tourist would notice is the architecture and how the buildings appear on the skyline. And if we ever get to visit certain cities where one can see caged windows, balconies, and doors, so it is usually an issue with the crime scenario in the city, and it greatly reduces the aesthetics. Over the years, governments, especially in Karachi, have invested a large sums of money to improve the policing infrastructure, and in fact, it has been fruitful to some extent, as we can see on this graph that this trend line is the total police station, which is increasing over the years, and total burglary is a bit decreasing over the years. So, yes, investing in the policing infrastructure by respective governments have been somewhat fruitful. But if the engineering community can join hands and address the challenge from the engineering point of view, it can play a vital role in the money stressed economy. The government will be able to invest on other pertinent issues if the engineering community can play a role in designing buildings, in constructing buildings that are safer to live in, which is where we come to the concept of crime prevention through environmental design. We define crime prevention through environmental design as a proactive approach of crime prevention, which aims to reduce the opportunities for crime in the initial phases of the facility development. And this is a proactive approach which is intended to reduce the opportunities of crime to the negative elements by considering a way in which the buildings are designed. I'll begin with the literature review. Documenting minimal requirements for physical security is usually labor intensive. Therefore, crime prevention has gotten a lot of attention. Crime prevention pays an attention to the built environment attributes and strategies that is focused on improving the layout to reduce the crime vulnerability. Crime prevention environmental design is based on five components: natural surveillance, access control, territoriality, exterior maintenance, activities support. We'll begin with an example of each. So for example, this is natural surveillance. As you can see on the picture on the left-hand side, these bushes are covering the windows, which provides a poor example of natural surveillance. But on the right picture, the bushes are trimmed off, and this is much more in essence with natural surveillance. This is access control. Everybody has experienced such type of a setting where a person sitting at a main reception is able to see the entrance and exit of registry of people visiting visitors. This is territoriality, as you can see the grillage. So this is somewhat a private, uh, somewhat a public space, and this is a private space. So this is an example of territoriality. This is exterior maintenance. So as you can see, very poor exterior maintenance, and over here we are observing relatively better exterior maintenance. And this is an example of an activity support, not perfectly, but giving an example what is meant by activity support. So something which promotes some people around the vicinity of a facility is intended to be called as a activity support. The scope and objectives of the study. The study assessed the level of awareness and perception of SIPTED, which is crime prevention fundamental design principles in the local construction industry. The contractors, architect, and design consultants were the target audience for the primary data collection through surveys. And I'll just explain the survey, the study methodology in the next slide. The surveyed organizations operated within the geographical boundaries of Karachi city. So this is the scope and objectives of the study. Research methodology. It began with the literature collection and review. Literature collection and review were pertinent to the 5 aspects of SIPTED, as also explained in the previous slide. It led to the development of a questionnaire. The questionnaire had 2 parts, part A and part B. Part A had these 5 aspects of SIPTED, and there were statements. For example, aspect 1, natural surveillance, had 10 statements, A1 to A10. And similarly, aspect 2, B1 to B8, and C1 to C10, and E1 to E6. So from aspect 1 to aspect 5, there were statements that were actually defining the each of the 5 aspects, and people and the respondents were asked how much do they agree or disagree to each of the statements that are defining the respective aspect of the SIPTED concept. Moving further, then survey questionnaires were sent to the target audience, and there were 30 questionnaires sent to each of the 3 target audience, and there were about 31 that were accepted to be included in the analysis. The data analysis included the weighted averages, ranking of statements, and t-tests to compare whether or not the perception is just a mere chance, or there is a statistical significance of having the same perception. Then conclusions and recommendations were drafted. Okay, data analysis and results. Just looking at the 5 aspects. So as you can see on this slide, I have mentioned the top common or top ranked as top ranked statement of each aspect of SIPTED that each of the target respondent considered to be the defining component of, for example, contractor. According to contractors, the physical design has a capacity to improve the capacity to promote natural surveillance and opportunities for residents. So according to contractors group, this is the statement that best defines the natural surveillance. Whereas architect is considering some other, consultant is considering another A6. So one of the important aspects that natural surveillance, none of the surveyed target audience considered the same statement to be the defining point of each aspect of SIPTED. But if we consider, for example, aspect 3, so contractor and architect both considered that C10, which is redundant reinforcement, can work because user familiarity with each other and the surroundings. They both consider this to be the defining aspect of territoriality. Such similar for exterior maintenance, contractor and architect do have a similar perception of exterior maintenance, and likewise activity support. Contractor and architects do have the same level of awareness among themselves. Now coming to discussion, one tail it was stochastic t-test was performed between common perception group at level of significance 0.05. So just coming up with the whole thing first. So as you can see on each of the tables, we have common perception groups, which means that contractor and architects did have certain common elements. Uh, very differently was consultant, and we had two of the three statements were common, not just the first one, but maybe on the other second, third, or fourth level, they were common. And inferential statistics suggest that the t-test is significant to establish contractor perception to be better than architect. Although contractors and architects did have a common understanding between them, but when t-test was performed at level significance 0.05, it was found that contractors had a better significance. So, for example, for aspect number two, architect and consultant were found to be sharing some common perception, and contractor was significantly very different. And when t-test was performed, then it was found that it was insignificant to say that architect's perception was better than consultants. Similarly, for aspect three, architect and consultant was the common perception, and there were uh, a moderately common perception group was between contract and architect because only one out of top three statements were common between contractor and architect. However, two out of three top statements were common between architect and consultant. So for that, the t-test is insignificant to establish architect perception. Even it is not statistically significant to say that architects have a better perception. Similarly, for exceeding payments, uh, the t-test was successful in establishing that contractors has a better perception. Similarly, for activity support, all three groups of stakeholders had commonality between them. However, the t-test is significant to establish contractors' perception. The t-test for architects' perception is also better than the consultants. So this was like in-depth analysis on whether the perception was significantly valid at level of significance 0.05. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation on the note that these were some of the references that were used and cited. And with that, thank you very much, everyone, for your time and patient listening. Thank you. Take care.